What happens when the head of your team not only abandons you at the most important moment of the year, but when it returns, it launches an indirect one that can change the course of your season? Today we unravel the true message behind the silence, and then the bomb of Frédéric Vasseur to Lewis Hamilton after the Austrian GP. In the 2025 season, the Austria Grand Prix was marked in red for Ferrari. Not only because of the history of the circuit, the requirement of the Red Bull Ring, or the media pressure that imposes running in the most direct rival's house, but because this event had been strategically selected by the Maranello engineers to introduce the first major technical evolution of the SF25. An ambitious update of the flat background that not only promised to solve the problems of aerodynamic stability, but also sought to mark the beginning of a new competitive chapter for the team. It was the expected moment to begin to materialize the Hamilton-Ferrari project, a high-profile union with titanic expectations. But when everything seemed to align for a firm impulse forward, a silent detail shook the paddock. Frédéric Vasseur, the architect of this new era, did not appear. What makes this situation even more intriguing is timing. Just when Ferrari executes a key technical bet, when Hamilton begins to demonstrate signals of adaptation to the car, when the team needs cohesion, Vasseur decides not to be. There are no recent precedents that a team director is absent without delegating its presence through forceful messages from the remote. In Austria, on the other hand, silence was total. No public message to support your pilots, no interaction captured by the cameras between racks, no explicit directive. Just a vacuum. That vacuum in the Ferrari wall was more than physical. It was strategic and symbolic. In the internal narrative of the team, where each gesture matters and each look is analyzed as a state of state, Vasseur's decision not to be present in the first weekend where his technical project began to take shape left everyone wondering if he was actually sending a message. Maybe Hamilton, perhaps the rest of the team, or even external observers who question Ferrari's ability to return to the top with this new binomial. In a sport where trust is built not only with words but with direct presence and backup, the decision not to appear can weigh more than any public criticism. And at a time when Hamilton, after years in Mercedes, takes his first steps in red territory, that void of Vasseur could have been interpreted as an undercover warning. In Ferrari there is no room for comfort. Not even when progress begins to notice. Here the results are required. And they are already demanded. The technical evolution of SF25 represented one of the most expectation points for Ferrari in this first third of the championship. After a start of the season marked by the inconsistency, the lack of rhythm in rapid curves and an erratic back behavior of the rear train, the team decided to bet on a background solution. A deep redesign of the car. But what was sold as a specific update was actually the signal of the true start of the competitive version of the 2025 car. The implementation was executed in Austria, a circuit where aerodynamic efficiency is vital, but where any structural weakness is also exposed with crudeness. The modifications covered the four key areas of the flat background: the lateral deflectors, the central body, the suction edges, and the geometry of the diffuser. These changes were not cosmetics. They were the attempt to transform the way the car generates aerodynamic load. The SF25 was born with a conceptual defect. Its operational window was too narrow. Only in very specific conditions, with extremely low heights with respect to the ground and an aggressive tuning, the car delivered its maximum performance. But that brought a cost. Extreme wear of the lower plate and excessive sensitivity to temperature changes or track conditions, as exposed with the disqualification of both Ferrari and the China GP due to technical infraction. The update in Austria tried to unlock that dilemma. He simply sought more aerodynamic load but a more stable and predictable delivery of it. In theory, this would allow Hamilton and Leclerc playing with a broader range of adjustments and, above all, gaining confidence. But the implementation showed the limits of a partial solution. The behavior in middle curves improved. The car seemed more balanced in the first sector of Red Bull Ring, where the passage by curve demands precision. However, that gain brought new questions. Ferrari knew that this evolution was just the first stage. The second step, much more ambitious, was to redesign the rear suspension. That piece, originally scheduled to debut in Silverstone, was postponed for development complications. And there resides the key point. Without that new suspension, the new soil cannot deploy its full potential. What should have been an integrated system remains, for the moment, an incomplete combination. In practice, it is as if Hamilton were trying to drive a new generation car with components of the old model on its rear axle. The consequence is that, although the front transmits stability, the rear remains temperamental. The pilot feels one thing when entering a curve, but another completely different when leaving. Hamilton, who had already begun to modify his driving style to adapt to the peculiarities of SF25, found a new paradox in Austria. The car responds better, yes, but it is still unpredictable in the key phases of the return. Traction remains limited when the rear tire leaves the ideal thermal window. The asphalt temperature in Austria, lower than in previous events, showed that Ferrari has not resolved its Achilles heel. And that generates a double frustration. The car gives signs of improvement, but it is still far from being a title weapon. In an environment where McLaren and Red Bull can attack with more versatile configurations, Ferrari is still forced to walk down the tightrope. The result on the track was a misleading classification. Hamilton was fourth, yes, but his return was more than a surgical execution than of a structural consistency of the car. And in the race, the limitations reappeared. The car was still showing progressive survival in long batches, and the degradation rhythm continued to penalize both pilots in front of rivals with more balanced packages. The technical effort was undeniable. But without the arrival of the new suspension system, the entire potential of the SF25 will continue to be trapped in theory. For Hamilton, that implies always leading to the limit of frustration, knowing that there is speed but not being able to access it reliably. After a tense career with clear signs of technical progress but without conclusive results, Ferrari kept silent. No immediate statement, no significant press conference. Vasseur, still absent from the circuit, let the first hours pass without issuing any comment. And that communicational absence was as deafening as physics. In Ferrari, everything that is not said also has weight. But when he finally spoke, he did it with surgical precision, and with a symbolic burden that did not go unnoticed by those who know the internal dynamics of the Scuderia. What he pronounced publicly was not a direct criticism, but a declaration of intentions that in Maranello's internal language translates into pressure without filter. Vasseur praised the technical improvements, recognized the team's work to adapt the SF25 to a more stable performance window, but slid a phrase that made the difference. "We are still where we should be. This is only the beginning. Our pilots must accompany this evolution with the same intensity with which we demand the technical department." That phrase, simple in appearance, carries a powerful subtext. Ferrari is not formed with signs of progress. Expect immediate results. And above all, he hopes that Lewis Hamilton, 7 times world champion, becomes a catalyst for a transformation, not only an passive actor of his own adaptation process. In other words, what Vasseur did was redefine the framework of expectations. It is no longer about giving Hamilton time. It is about demanding that you accelerate your own understanding of the car, to take a more incisive role in development, to translate your experience not only in track speed, but also in leadership within the team. In an environment where every detail is registered and each statement analyzed at multiple levels, what Vasseur communicated was somewhat deeper. The learning stage is over. The emotional credit of its signing has been consumed. From now on, what is expected are tangible results. For a pilot who came to Ferrari with the dream of closing his legacy with an 8th title, these words can feel as an elegant slap. Because behind that phrase a warning is hidden. There is no time. There is no infinite patience. And if the new Ferrari Hamilton project wants to survive beyond illusion, it needs to translate into results. And fast. The most revealing of all this is that, instead of building an unconditional support speech, Vasseur chose another path. He chose the silent pressure, the thrust without praise, the demand as a mechanism of progress. Perhaps because he knows that to reactivate Ferrari's winning culture, technical improvements are not enough. Character is needed. Discomfort is necessary. And Hamilton, if he wants to be the man who leads that resurrection, will have to respond in that same tone. And what we have witnessed in Austria goes far beyond what time leaves indicate. The absence of Frédéric Vasseur, his carefully calibrated statement after the event, and Hamilton's performance with a half-end car are part of a more complex choreography. One that is not solved only with mechanics or talent, but with politics, pressure and ability to adapt under fire. Lewis Hamilton's story in Ferrari is still writing. But if something has been clear after the Austrian GP, it is that the rules of the game in Maranello are different. Here, the legacy does not give immunity. Reputation is just a starting point, not a shield. And Vasseur, with his decision not to be present and with his later words, has left a clear message. The path to success in Ferrari does not go through the past, but by the present. What matters is what you do today, under pressure, when promises no longer reach. This episode marks a turning point. Because from now on, Hamilton's story in Ferrari will no longer be that of adaptation, transition, or promise in the future. It will be that of the daily demand. to demonstrate that it did not come to complete a cycle, but to start a new era. But for this narrative to hold, it needs victories, it needs podiums, needs character. Because in Maranello there is no place for myth if it does not translate into glory. And you, who have followed this analysis here, ask you, do you think Hamilton has what is necessary to light that spark that makes him the absolute leader of Ferrari?